I had my hands in the flowers I'd arranged for their rehearsal dinner when Amanda delivered her verdict in my son's kitchen, the satin of her wedding dress gleaming on the door like a warning. "The best gift would be if you disappeared from our family," she said, and Michael didn't meet my eyes as he nodded. 3 years earlier, I had sold the Victorian Robert, and I restored wiring $87,000, my entire savings, to help them buy this house. I told myself it was love, told myself there would always be a place for me here. That morning, I'd ironed linens, wrangled vendors, and coaxed hydrangeas into behaving. My one offense was suggesting a wedding could survive without swan-shaped ice. When I asked where I was supposed to go, Amanda studied her manicure and said a hotel, a sister's couch, anywhere that wasn't here. Michael added that the house was more hers now. She handled finances and improvements, and I had just given some money once. The words chalked a hard line through the room. I felt something click into place, not a break so much as a gear shifting. "You're right," I told them, and went upstairs to the guest room I had been careful never to call mine. I folded clothes into a suitcase while their voices downstairs braided plans for a yoga studio or office, my body already mapping the rhythm of departure. I paused by Robert's photograph, kissed 2 fingers, and pressed them to the glass. "Don't worry, love," I whispered. "I'm not going down without a fight." I set that fight in motion from the driver's seat in their the driveway. Margaret Chen, my attorney, picked up on a Saturday and listened while I recited the insult, the dismissal, the erasure. "Dorothy," she said, "I've been worried about this. The down payment wasn't a gift. At my insistence, we papered it as a loan with your name on the deed. Amanda never returned the acknowledgments, but the deed and mortgage list you as co-owner. You own 35% of the house." The information steadied me like a hand at the small of my back. Hypothetically, I asked what happens if I want to sell my share. As co-owner, you can force a sale. They get first refusal, buy you out at market value, or put the house on the market and split proceeds by percentage. Through the kitchen window, I saw Amanda twirl in her veil for a phone camera. Michael popped champagne. I watched the bubbles rise and break and dialed the country club. My name was on the reception contract. My card had paid the deposit. I canceled the whole thing and told the manager to charge every fee to me and send the bill to my hotel. 20 minutes later, I checked into a Hampton Inn, ordered a bowl of soup, and discovered the quiet intoxication of taking my own side. At 11:47 p.m., the calls began. I let the first scream itself hoarse on voicemail and then answered on the second ring. "I honored your request," I told Amanda. "You asked me to disappear." "I did. The club called you good." "Yes, I canceled the reception I was paying for." "No, I didn't cancel your marriage." "Yes, 200 people will be hungry." "No, I'm not fixing it." When Michael demanded to know what their guests would think, I said, they would think his bride told the woman funding her fairy tale to vanish, and the woman obliged. The cost stunned them when I finally said it out loud, $14,000 for a party they believed appeared by magic. While they sputtered, I switched off the lamp, slid under a hotel duvet that smelled like bleach and possibility, and let their notifications pile like snow on the nightstand. By morning, the feed of missed calls was a mosaic. I read them with the detached curiosity of a museum-goer. At 9, someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a tuxedo shirt gone limp and my son's face gone white. He tried to make it about sleeping arrangements and misunderstanding, but the word that finally left my mouth was abuse, the financial kind that hides under gratitude and family, and just this once. He said I was punishing them, and I told him I was protecting myself, drawing a border where my bank account ended and their entitlement began. I asked when he last called, simply to hear my voice when he last invited me, because he wanted me, not my wallet, when he last remembered my birthday without a reminder. He started to say always, and then discovered that silence has weight. I named the sums he'd never looked at, 37,000 in emergencies layered over the 87 for the down payment. He said they would have paid me back. I told him Amanda had been test driving cars, and he'd been pricing European vacations without mentioning repayment once. When he slumped with his head in his hands and asked what I wanted, I said to give them exactly what they asked for my disappearance and to take my money with me when I went. Then I told him about the deed. His face drained in stages as if each percentage point emptied a color. I own 35%, I said. I'm exercising my rights. Buy me out at current market value or sell. He blurted numbers, doing the math. I had already done 300,000 in value, my share over 100. He tried to build lifeboats out of phrases like payment plan and will be better, but words without structure are just air. The hotel phone rang, the country club manager wanting to relay that the bride's mother would pay to save the reception. I declined with courtesy and hung up on the idea that problems vanish if you throw a parent at them. Michael was so quiet, he could have been furniture. On his way out, he asked where I was staying. Somewhere you'll never again feel entitled to. After he left, Amanda tried a different register. Tears, the trembling promise of anything, apologies shaped to fit the word panic rather than the word truth. I said I believed in apologies with legs and calendars. I believed in budgets that added in adults who counted. By late afternoon, a local news crew panned over the country club steps while a woman in lace sobbed into her bouquet. I stirred my late lunch and felt only a clean, unfamiliar mercy, the relief of not rescuing people from consequences they authored. That evening, the knock I opened for belonged to a woman with silvery hair and a posture taught by decades of damage control. I recognized her from a seating chart. Barbara Hworth, she said, Amanda's mother. May I sit? I braced for the speech about forgiveness and optics. Instead, I got thank you. She said she'd offered to pay for the reception, not because she approved, but because there were 200 hungry mouths and she had a role to play. But she wouldn't loan a cent toward buying me out. If her daughter wanted to own a house, she could start by respecting the woman who helped buy it. Then she told me about the car Amanda wrecked at 16 and the lawyer her husband hired to erase that mistake, and the way erasure became currency in their household. Whatever you choose, Barbara said when she left a card on my bedside table, please don't cushion this fall. Consequence is the only language my daughter hasn't been taught. I slept like a woman who had returned the dictionary to its proper shelf. On Monday, a detective with the kind of gentle eyes that say he has seen everything called to inform me a report had been filed about possible elder financial abuse. The report suggested cognitive decline and a welfare check. I brought a binder to the precinct and set it on his desk. The spine creaked under canceled checks, bank statements, transfers, and 3 years of receipts that drew a map from my savings into my children's lifestyle. While he read, I played a voicemail that called me insane for declining to fund a party and urged psychiatric help. He asked if there was any history of cognitive issues. None, I said. Only a recent case of clarity. He closed the file and the welfare check in one motion and slid a community resource pamphlet toward me anyway. The reflex of a decent man. When Michael called minutes later to say the police weren't proceeding, I told him I understood. After all, the abused party had finally stopped the bleeding. He asked to meet. I named the location, Margaret's office, and told him to bring his wife and a realistic proposal. Margaret's conference room smelled like leather and printer ink. Amanda walked in without her armor eyes, raw voice, careful in apology, shaped like a lifeline. I nodded to the words and pointed to the paper. Margaret laid out the facts, the deed, the mortgage, the percentages. You were sent acknowledgments 3 times, she told Amanda, and received none back. Amanda said she'd been planning a wedding for 3 years and forgot. Margaret's eyebrows did the job my tongue wanted to. I offered 2 paths. Buy my share at market value or sell and divide the proceeds. There is no third option, I said, because there is no third math. Michael asked for time. The 30-day clock started with the sweep of Margaret's pen. 2 days later, Barbara appeared at my hotel with a bottle of wine and a confession. She had flown back to check on the children, and she admitted to check herself. Her husband had specialized in the kind of love that confuses rescue with care. She pulled a check from her purse, $25,000 Amanda had begged her to hand me as a good faith payment, and tore it in half over the wastebasket. No more bailing out, she said, not even with money that won't hurt me to lose. If they want a life, let them build one. That night the text came from Michael about a home equity loan they were considering to cover part of a buyout. I said we could talk after they produced a full budget and a plan that paid off debt rather than dressing it in a new outfit. We met with spreadsheets that looked like a murder scene. Every line item told a story: restaurants in place of groceries, a gym card that checked in twice a month, premium television, raising its hand for attention travel, and clothes nodding guiltily from their columns. Amanda tried to say professional image and networking, as if the words could reduce the bill. I ran a finger down the page and asked when eating out had become oxygen. I asked what happens after you raid your home for equity to pay credit cards. You are seasoned at maxing. Michael asked what I would need to see. I told him a budget that fits the income. They actually have proof that the world doesn't end if dinner is pasta. You boil at home, and Amanda with a job. She blanched as if I'd suggested meteorology on Mars. You are 39, I said gently. There is no reason you cannot be paid for the labor you already know how to do. I thought about letting the house go to market and taking my 90-odd thousand after fees. Then I thought about the boy who learned to ride a bike in our cul-de-sac, and the woman who couldn't see her own gifts for the proof of everyone else's. So I made a third path that wasn't on the table until I built it. 75,000 buys me out instead of 105, I said, but with conditions. Amanda finds and keeps a job for 2 years. 1 car is sold to attack debt. No new debt, no restaurant dining, no discretionary shopping for 24 months. Margaret will conduct monthly reviews. If you breach the full amount, becomes due. Amanda whispered that it sounded like prison. No, I said. It sounds like adulthood with a parole officer you hired by being careless. They went into the hallway, came back smaller, and agreed. Margaret drafted and notarized while I watched my son sign his way into a hard lesson, and my daughter-in-law sign her way into a future she might finally own. In the quiet that follows a storm, the air is clear enough to notice your breathing. The first month looked like exile from glamour. They sold the newer car and sent me the receipt. Amanda took a job at a dental office reception desk, and to everyone's surprise, arrived early, stayed late, and learned insurance codes like a new language. Their grocery receipts became a ledger of beans and rice and ground truth. When they slipped and they did the way people trip over old habits, they called Margaret first, not me, and we met with bank statements like X-rays that could forecast relapse. Meanwhile, I signed a lease at a cheerful senior community with a long pool, a library bathed in morning light, and a walking trail that stitched the grounds to an orchard. The first time I set a watering can beside a pot of marigolds on my balcony, I realized my hands had been busy with other people's gardens for years. Now, their work finally circled back to me. 2 months in, I had lunch with Barbara on a patio shaded by bougainvillea. She reported that Amanda was discovering the humility and strange joy of earning $1 twice once when it lands in your account again when you decide not to spend it. Michael had stopped talking about European vacations and started talking about crockpot recipes. They were cooking together, walking in the evenings, and paying in cash. I confessed to Barbara that I had expected to feel triumphant and mostly felt tired, though in a sweet way, the tired that follows moving furniture you should have rearranged years ago. The welfare check detective sent a follow-up email with a link to resources and a line that said, "For what it's worth, ma'am, that binder would teach a class." I wrote back that I hoped the class would teach boundaries better than love had. 4 months in, Margaret texted a photo of Amanda, grinning in an office vest by a stack of charts. The caption read, "Promoted to office manager." When Amanda called me, her laugh sounded new, less lacquered, more belle. She said she was exhausted in a way she was proud of, that the hours she put in had shape and consequence, that she never knew she could keep a staff calendar humming like a small orchestra. She apologized again, this time with sentences that stayed standing once the wind of panic stopped. I didn't accept or reject. I set terms the way one sets a table for a meal you want to taste. Lunch in public, I said. If we do well with that, maybe dinner at home. She agreed, as if I had handed her a certificate she'd worked for. I took a part-time volunteer shift, teaching a Tuesday budgeting class at the library for women whose kids wore hand-me-downs and whose eyes didn't. I wrote 3 truths on the board in different words each week. Money is a tool, not a love letter. Accountability is a kind of tenderness. And the person you save by saying no might be the one in your mirror. Some nights, I sat in a folding chair at book club next to a widower named Frank, who laughed at the same lines I did and walked me to my car with the shy courtesy of a man who knows the cost of gentleness. When Michael texted a photo of spaghetti night, the steam clouding a dollar store colander, Amanda's hand holding a wooden spoon, I answered with a heart, not a transfer. The deed transfer recorded at the county courthouse on a cold Tuesday. $75,000 moved into my account with a quiet chime. I stared at the number and did not cry. I wrote a check to myself labeled Restoration. Then I went to the community garden and tucked seedlings into soil that had been turned by neighbors, watered by the sky, and reserved for the simple act of growth. The first Wednesday after the transfer, Amanda asked again about dinner. I said yes, and meant it. The house smelled like tomato sauce and humility. We ate at the same kitchen island where she once dismissed me. She asked me about the books I was reading. I asked her about the patients whose names she never told me, but whose stories she had memorized: the veteran who hates needles, but comes anyway, the grandmother who makes the office laugh every cleaning. When I stood to leave, she tried to press a container of leftovers into my hands, and I said I had a full fridge and a full heart, and that maybe this time she could keep the food she made. We smiled at what it meant. 6 months became a year, and the lesson grew roots. They sent Margaret their statements without prompting. The gym membership was gone, the streaming trimmed to a single service, the dinners out replaced with picnics, and a blanket that earned its grass stains. Amanda kept her job and eventually earned the title on the door. Michael learned to look past the month into the year. When they backslid into a small purchase or a silly subscription, the breach did not detonate. It became a conversation, a repair, a line drawn again with a steadier hand. The house looked different by then, and so did I, when I walked up the path to visit for coffee some Sunday afternoons. The yoga studio never materialized in the room that used to hold my suitcase. Instead, there was a desk where Michael filed school forms and tax returns without calling me at midnight. I kept my promise to myself and didn't disappear. I recalibrated. The old ache softened into a scar I touched now and then to remind myself what healed means. Barbara and I became the kind of friends who send each other photos of produce that looks too pretty to eat. We met on birthdays and agreed that a daughter can be a stranger and still become herself in time. We also agreed that enabling is a kindness that chooses the easy path for the giver and the hard path for the receiver. When I told my budgeting class that a young mother cried in relief and said she thought love meant constantly throwing yourself under the bus, I told her love sometimes means clearing the road and handing over the keys. In my little apartment with its morning-light kitchen, I framed a photo of the Victorian Robert and I had restored. I put it beside a new photo of me in a ridiculous sun hat, dirt on my knees, a tomato plant in my hands. 2 lives, 1 woman. At book club, I told Frank that I was learning to measure days in joy rather than obligation. He smiled and said he was too. If you're still listening, here's the part I most want remembered, the sentence that took me 68 years to say without apology. Generosity without boundaries is not love. It is an invitation to be erased. The day Amanda told me to disappear, I did vanish, but only from the role I had been performing. The person who reappeared had a spine, a ledger, a lawyer, and a voice. Setting limits did not destroy my family. It gave us a chance to build one that wasn't financed by resentment. When they stopped treating me like an ATM, they learned how to be adults. When I stopped funding their fantasy, I learned how to be a woman again, not just a mother who pays. If this story helped you breathe a little easier, tap like so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe for more true stories about boundaries and becoming. And tell me in the comments, the moment you chose yourself, you might give someone else the courage to choose too.